Maria stood at the small corner store, clutching a crumpled dollar bill in her tiny hand, her eyes scanning the shelves of milk and bread and eggs she had been sent by her mother to buy a few things for dinner, but she only had enough for one item. Her stomach tightened as she looked at the cold milk in the glass refrigerator. She knew she needed it for her little brother, who was coughing all morning at home. She shuffled forward slowly, her shoes worn thin from months of walking the dusty streets. After school, she placed the dollar bill on the counter. The shopkeeper, a middle-aged man with a thin mustache, looked down at her and frowned. Maria could feel her cheeks burn. She lowered her eyes and whispered, "I promise to pay for this. Milk when I grow up?" She did not know if he heard her, but she hoped he understood. She tried to appear confident, but her hands shook slightly as she waited for him to hand her the milk. The man glanced at her for a long moment, his gaze falling on a small birthmark on her cheek, shaped like a tiny crescent moon. Maria had been teased for it at school, but today it was her shield and her story. He finally nodded slowly and poured the milk into a small paper carton. He did not say a word, but Maria felt a weight lift off her chest. She clutched the carton close to her chest as she turned to leave. The bell above the door jingled softly, and the cool wind outside made her shiver. She pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders. The street was dusty, and the sun had not yet set. She started walking toward home, imagining her mother's tired smile when she delivered the milk. Imagining her brother's eyes lighting up when he saw her standing in the doorway, she moved past people hurrying. In the opposite direction, their faces unfamiliar and busy. Maria felt small and yet proud she had kept her promise. Even if it was only in her heart, she thought about the day she would grow up and pay for the milk. And more than that, she would never let anyone say she was not good enough because of her birthmark. She walked past the bakery, the small park, and the shuttered storefronts, counting the steps in her head to make the walk home seem shorter. She thought about the tiny house with peeling paint and the old swing in the backyard where she and her brother played after school. She could hear his cough again in her mind and pressed the carton of milk closer. She wondered if anyone else would see the moon on her cheek and understand that it was a mark of promise, not shame. She wondered if someday someone would look at her and remember this moment, just like she would remember the taste of the milk in her mouth. That first day she carried it home. The sound of her footsteps echoed against the walls of buildings, and in the distance she heard the bark of a dog, the low hum of traffic, and the faint chatter of people returning home from work. She breathed in the smells of bread and smoke and dust and felt herself part of the city. Even though she had always felt small, she realized she was strong enough to walk the streets on her own, and brave enough to make promises that mattered. She imagined the day she would come back to the store as an adult and pay for every milk and bread and egg she had ever taken in secret, and she whispered again to herself, "I promise to pay for this milk when I grow up." Years passed, and Maria grew taller and stronger. Her small hands that once clutched a single dollar bill now held notebooks and textbooks as she walked the crowded streets to school. She never forgot the day she promised to pay for the milk and the quiet nod of the shopkeeper. She remembered the birthmark on her cheek and how it had made her feel different, yet special. She worked odd jobs after school, sweeping floors, delivering newspapers, and helping neighbors with their groceries. Every coin she earned, she saved in a small tin box hidden under her bed. She watched her mother struggle to pay bills and feed her brother, and she felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her small shoulders. She became determined to make a life where no one had to go without. She dreamed of a future where she could help others just as she had hoped to be helped when she was little. She studied late into the night, her candle flickering against the walls of their tiny apartment. She imagined herself wearing a smart suit, standing in a big office with people listening to her with respect. And she smiled at the thought sometimes she would trace the crescent moon on her cheek in the mirror, remembering the day she had spoken the words that had changed nothing in the moment, but everything in her heart. She never spoke about that promise to anyone, not even her brother. She carried it silently like a secret jewel until the day she applied for an internship at a large company where the CEO was known for noticing the little things and rewarding honesty. Maria did not expect anything she wanted, only to learn and to grow and to show that she could work hard and never give up. She arrived early on her first day, nervous but ready. The hallways smelled of polished wood and coffee, and her shoes clicked on the shiny floors. She greeted people politely and answered questions carefully. She remembered the dollar bill and the milk and the nod of the shopkeeper as she handed in her first assignment. She felt proud and a little amazed that she could keep her promise to herself by being diligent and honest. She became known for her attention to detail and for noticing the small things others overlooked. She organized files, cleaned up mistakes, and quietly helped colleagues without expecting recognition. She wore her hair pulled back so the birthmark on her cheek was clearly visible. It had grown with her face and looked like a mark of distinction rather than imperfection. One afternoon, the CEO passed through her department. He had a habit of observing people unnoticed, and today he stopped at her desk. His eyes fell on the crescent moon on her cheek, and something clicked in his memory. He stared for a long moment. Maria felt a jolt of recognition, but could not place why her face seemed familiar. The CEO asked politely about her work, and she explained calmly, detailing everything she had done and the reasons behind her methods. He listened carefully, and then smiled in a way that made Maria feel both nervous and proud. He asked if she had ever made a personal sacrifice for someone else, and without thinking, Maria shared the story of her childhood, the milk, the dollar, and the promise she had whispered to a man in a small corner store. She spoke with humility and honesty, describing how she had never forgotten the moment and how it had shaped her life. The CEO nodded slowly and said that sometimes the smallest acts of courage and honesty reveal the true character of a person. Maria blushed and looked down, but inside she felt a spark. She realized that the moment she thought was insignificant had actually guided her entire life. She thought about the promise she had made years ago and felt it was still alive and now somehow being recognized. She did not know that the CEO had long remembered that day and had been quietly keeping an eye on the corner store employees and their customers. The memory of the little girl with the birthmark had stayed with him through the years, and now here she was standing in front of him, honest, diligent, and ready for a chance to change the world. The CEO invited Maria to a small meeting room where the sunlight streamed through tall windows and dust motes danced in the golden light. He asked her to sit, and she obeyed quietly, feeling nervous but composed. He leaned forward and spoke softly, telling her that he had remembered a little girl from years ago in a small corner store with a crescent moon on her cheek and a promise whispered over a carton of milk. Maria blinked in surprise, unsure how to respond. Her heart pounded and her palms were slightly sweaty. She nodded slowly and explained that she did not remember many details, but that she had always carried that promise in her heart. The CEO smiled warmly and said that honesty and determination were rare gifts, and that the courage to care for someone else, even in small ways, could change a life. Maria listened intently, feeling a mix of disbelief and gratitude. He continued explaining that he had come across her story through the store owner, who had told him years later about the little girl who had promised to pay for milk and never forgot it. He had been searching for someone with that kind of character, someone who understood value, responsibility, and compassion, and now he saw it. Reflected in Maria, her eyes widened as the significance of the moment washed over her. She felt tears sting the corners of her eyes. She realized that her childhood promise was no longer just a memory. It was a recognition of everything she had endured and achieved. The CEO asked Maria if she would like to join a special program within the company to work on projects that could help communities in need. She felt a lump in her throat as she nodded vigorously. This was the chance she had. Work toward the opportunity to make a difference, to honor the promise she had whispered as a child. She remembered the dusty street, the worn shoes, the paper carton of milk, and the way she had pressed it to her chest. Imagining her brother at home smiling at her courage, she thought about her mother and the sacrifices she had made and felt a surge of determination. She wanted to help people who had no one to help them. She wanted to change lives. The CEO shook her hand firmly and said that he believed she had the heart and mind to make an impact and that he would personally support her journey. Maria spent the following months working tirelessly on projects providing clean water and food to neighborhoods that struggled just as she had once struggled. She remembered the little acts of kindness she had received.